Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into some malicious compliance. Before we start, did you know that KCC now has a shorts channel? Check out KCC Shorts listed at the top of the description down below for under 1 minute Ask Reddit questions and answers and short stories. Our first story today comes to us from Zypherman300. Project cancellation fee is 50% of the purchase order value? We'll revise the purchase order value then. Let's jump right in. Hi everyone, hope you're having a swell day. If your day is going less than stellar, then know that you are strong and you can do this. Reach out to the Reddit community and the kind supportive people here will try to help you, or at least provide a place for you to vent. Okay, now on to the story. Now, bear in mind that I was on the short end of the stick of this malicious compliance, and it's a complete dick move, truly malicious. And that it's a long saga, so strap yourself in, boys and girls, it's a long ride. The cast: me, the lead project engineer; Adam, my boss; Bob, the Client Corp's lead engineer; Charlie, Bob's replacement of sorts. Client Corp is a subsidiary of Mega Client Corp. The calm before the storm. Once upon a time, many moons ago, I was but a lowly peon project engineer, working on a big $1 million project that my company was contracted to do for Client Corp. That was a part of a larger project by the Client Corp. Things were progressing well, we had the job design and engineering done, materials ordered, ready to mobilize the team to the job site. All of a sudden the client, Bob, says unto us peons, "Hark ye, your project will now be cancelled, because the project will be cancelled." Of course, we weren't too happy about it because, 1, all the work we'd put in up to that point basically just went up in smoke. 2, even with cancellation fees, that kind of just barely covered the costs we'd incurred to date, no profit. 3, we were now stuck with a huge amount of materials that we had to find a way to redeploy, with a shelf life. 4, we knew that claiming cancellation fees was going to be a painful, thorny path. Boy, oh boy, was it a truly painful and thorny path to walk indeed. Breakdown in negotiations. So my team and boss put together the supporting documents, etc., and prepared the job cancellation invoice, then appointed me as the sacrificial lamb bearer of the cancellation invoice to deliver the news to the Client Corp. Bob was not happy, duh. Negotiations started with Bob, his bosses, Adam, my boss, and me in the room. Barely 10 minutes in and there's raised voices, palms slamming on the table, angry men all around. Adam and myself tried our best to placate the client's team to no avail, even as they tried whatever intimidation tactics they could to bully us into dropping the cancellation fees. We'd worked out a few options beforehand to be more flexible in this, but all were shut down by Bob's team in anger. Finally, Adam said the magic words. This cancellation clause is written into the master contract with Mega Client. If you don't agree to this, then perhaps we can escalate to Mega Client's higher management for arbitration. The room fell silent. Obviously, Bob's client's team already had a lot of foul-smelling substances on their plate already, with the failure of the larger project as a whole. Their subsidiary organization was formed as a special purpose company just for this project, and the last thing they needed was more attention from the parent organization. Cue malicious compliance. Fine, says Bob. You know what? We'll pay you the cancellation fee, 50% of the purchase order value as stated in the contract. Bob's face took on a sinister smirk. But we'll need to adjust the purchase order value. And with that, Adam and I got booted out of the office. The very next day, my company accounts department started screaming. Apparently, client had indeed adjusted the purchase order value from the original X million dollars down to $10,000. That meant the cancellation fee, going by the letter of the contract, was now only $5,000. Jesus, talk about a low blow. But wait, there's more. All subsequent attempts to reach out to Bob and his team by phone or email were stonewalled. Finally, after a few days, I personally paid Bob a visit at his office, only to have him laugh in my face and basically say, "What you gonna do about it?" Other follow-up meeting requests to Bob and his team were denied outright for a couple of weeks. Finally, Adam pulled some strings to have our company's senior management talk to Mega Client senior management, after which we got to meet with an entirely different team than before. Enter Charlie. Charlie was on a different part of the team from Bob, and we hadn't had any dealings with him before. Charlie told us that Bob had been transferred back to Mega Client HQ, Client Corp was being disbanded, and now Charlie had to take over from Bob. Charlie also had no idea what had transpired before this, so we filled him in. You see, Bob had pulled a fast malicious compliance on us. He knew he was being transferred back to HQ, so he tried to screw us over and also make it look like the project cancellation costs were smaller than what they actually are. To give Charlie due credit, he did try to help us resolve the cancellation fees. Only problem is, with the stunt that Bob had pulled just before leaving, we were collectively stuck in a cesspit. You see, in order to correct the purchase order to the original correct value, it needed to be verified by the originator of said purchase order, Bob, who was no longer around, and approved by a manager, Bob's boss, who was also no longer around. To make things worse, since the larger project had been cancelled, finance and accounting functions were now taken over by Mega Client's finance team, who had no idea of the backstory, and a boatload of suspicion as to why the purchase order now has to be retroactively increased after project cancellation in order to facilitate cancellation fee payment to a supplier, by a huge amount no less. What do you mean you need to increase the PO amount from 10,000 to X million after the fact? We need to get verification from the originator and approver to proceed, all in the midst of a corporate reshuffle within Client and Mega Client Corp, which meant we had to deal with a rotating cast of different people who again had no idea of the backstory to all of this. Fun times. All in all, it took us a year of painful back and forth explanations and negotiations, often repeating the same story to multiple senior managers, multiple parties, accusations of fraud, some creative negotiations, including transference of inventory to the parent company, Mega Client, to support some of their other projects, which in turn messed with our company's other projects with Mega Client to get things finally resolved and recoup our losses. Meanwhile, just dealing with all this meant that effectively, I couldn't be reassigned to other projects because dealing with this became a full-time job in itself. Thus went one of the most stressful and unproductive years of my career, and also an abject lesson in personal and professional integrity. Please, dear readers, don't do this to your suppliers, and always pay attention to the cancellation clauses in your contracts. It sounds to me like whoever wrote up that contract in the first place is the person who really screwed this up for everybody else, because who in their right mind signs a contract that gives unilateral control of purchase orders to just one side? That makes absolutely no sense. Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our next story today comes to us from Limina Ninja. Always let karma have her last word, and always follow the rules at a customs border. Let's jump right in. A few years ago, I lived in Germany and wanted to spend winter holidays in my homeland, Serbia, which is not in the EU. I packed my 3 kids on my back seat. The twins were less than 2 years old and the elder daughter was 7. I drove from Hamburg to Hungary, where I had to cross the border to enter Serbia. However, due to the holiday season, the line with cars and buses was more than 1 kilometer long. The waiting time was several hours. There was no other option but to wait patiently and move slowly forward, 5 meters at a time. As the time went by, my kids got restless. I had to feed them, change their diapers, calm them down. Any parent who travels with toddlers knows this situation well. As I was focused on them, I didn't notice that 2 buses went through the border and that I had to move my car forward for some 30 to 40 meters. 3 cars behind me used this opportunity to slip by and get in front of me. By the way, such thing is not allowed before a customs border. I noticed it and went out of my car. I said to them that their conduct wasn't fair. I had 3 small kids in my car, and I wasn't using that situation to my advantage, and if I could wait patiently for my turn, so could they. But they all ignored me. I didn't tell them that this conduct is illegal, as I thought that everyone knew this. There were several signs that warned the drivers not to drive around and past a car in front of them. I didn't have time or energy to argue with them, so I got back into my car and thought, if I can wait for 6 hours, then I can also wait for 6.5 hours. Some 15 minutes later, 2 customs officers patrolled down the line of cars. For some reason unknown to me, probably routine, I cannot tell. They looked into each car, and when they saw my toddlers on the back seat, one of them told me that they would immediately open the second gate to speed things up. Hungarians are great, aren't they? 3 drivers from those cars in front of me heard this. They were outside having a smoke and rushed back to their driver's seats. I knew what was coming. I started the engine and let the three of them block my way, cut me off, and park at the front of the second, newly opened gate. I slowly left the first line and parked my car behind them. I had a gut feeling that my sister Karma, the B of B's, was about to act. Those two custom officers saw what happened and let the three cars through the gate, but they also told them to park their cars at the lots inside the custom border. Anyone who's ever crossed the Hungarian-Serbian border knows what that means. They were going to search all three cars and their passengers and baggage thoroughly, which meant hours and hours of waiting, answering endless questions, unpacking, packing, and all sorts of annoying stuff. When I arrived at the gate, the customs officers greeted me and asked for our passports. "What's the purpose of your travel?" one of them asked. I told him, "I want my kids to spend this Christmas with their grandparents in Serbia." He stamped our passports, greeted me, and wished me safe travel and a Merry Christmas. As a Christmas gift for my kids, he promised that he'd keep the three cars at the customs border for the next 6 hours at least, and that they'd have to pay a really nasty fine for their misdemeanor. The second customs officer said, "I hope you enjoyed your stay in Hungary, ma'am." "Oh yes I did, sir. I surely did." Ah yes, that new line they opened up right there, that one that you can see that's empty with nobody else in it, yep, that's the lane for consequences of your actions. Right over here, please. Enjoy your stay in Serbia. Alright, our next wall of story, comes to us from NG945. Older couple demanded we take their plane seats, only to demand we move once in flight. Let's jump right in. I was asked to post this over here too. I'm new in here, but here is my one karma-seeking revenge whilst it all played out story. So my husband, now ex, and I were one of the last to board the plane as he had misplaced his boarding ticket, and we had to search for it. When we got on, we were walking up the plane and could see our row. The plane was pretty much full and all settled in. A couple older than us sat in our row of 3. I checked our tickets and then asked the couple what seats they were supposed to be in, as those were ours. They refused to move. They had scored 3 seats to their 2 bottoms, whereas the row in front had a very slim girl at the window. The air hostess came over, and as they were older and playing the age card, the hostess asked us to sit the seats in front. My husband argued that in the event of an accident, our names were not on the right locations. However, the hostess said she would swap these over. So we sat down next to the slim girl, who took up no room whatsoever. The couple behind were very loudly gloating at their win and discussing how they would have a very pleasant 14-hour trip home. My husband told me as soon as we can to recline the seats as he was pissed at their gloating. So here we are settled when this man starts walking up the plane. He was a very, very large man, long dreadlocks, shoving a baguette in his mouth as he made his way up the aisle. My husband just looked at me and smiled as he realized the only spare seat was that window seat that would have been next to mine. And yes, Karma took a dump on the gloating couple's lap as the man asked them to move so he could get into his seat. Once settled, he took up a lot of the space, and once in the air, the lady called a hostess down and started having a strop about how we had stolen their seats and that we had refused to move when they boarded. Sadly for the lady, our argument at the start of the flight had been witnessed by the staff, as everyone else was settled by then, so she was shut down by the staff who refused to move us. They had a miserable flight as the guy kept getting up for the toilet, extra drinks, and extra snacks. Whoever he was a complete gem of a human being. OP, I hope you still reclined your seatbacks as much as you could. I hope the large gentleman passed gas all the time during that flight. And at the end of it all, I hope you bought that gentleman a drink, because he deserved it for unknowingly serving a large dish of karma. Our last story today comes to us from Tubis61. Do exactly what you're told. Let's jump right in. Back in my days working as a paramedic, I spent some time in the training school teaching clinical skills to new staff. We also had a driving section where we trained staff in response driving and also trained up new trainers. These are a couple of stories the head driving instructor had. One of the issues you find in teaching people to drive at speed is the red mist problem. Things are happening really fast and your attention narrows. This can be quite dangerous. This is something the driving instructors see when they have staff driving at high speeds, and one of the consequences is that the student drivers focus closely on what they are asked to do and follow instructions literally to the letter. When training new instructors, the senior instructors apply very specific malicious compliance, or as they call it, puppet driving. The idea is the senior instructor drives and interprets the student instructor's instructions exactly. The student instructor has to think very carefully about the instructions the driver is given. One example of this is the student instructor wants the driver to accelerate. They say, "Put your foot down," then the senior instructor will accelerate the vehicle as fast as they can along the road. If the student instructor then says, "Whoa, slow down," then the senior instructor will hit the brakes hard and carry out an emergency stop. Teaches you to think about what you are saying. The best story we heard of this was a chap who was really doing well in his instructor training, but sometimes didn't think too carefully about what he asked. The senior instructor took 3 trainees out to work on corners and bends. This is all about smooth transitions with careful road positioning on entering a bend, understanding the apex, and where to accelerate on leaving the bend. The senior instructor was playing the part of a driver, not getting the idea, and was making jerky transitions and positioning the car badly. They were following a civilian who was taking a really nice line in the bends, so the trainee instructor said, "Follow their line." So the senior instructor followed the instructions exactly. The drive was out in Lincolnshire in the UK, in flat country, few hills, fast roads, and some nice corners and bends. The car in front was moving quite quickly, and the senior instructor was doggedly following their line through the bends. That was right up to the point where the civilian misjudged a bend and went a foot or so off onto the verge. They held the car and got back on the road. The senior instructor followed the instructions he was given exactly and followed the line onto the verge. The driving school car was bigger and heavier, so it didn't go back on the road, it went a little further off the road. The other thing about Lincolnshire is there are some really nice houses, and this was the case at this bend. There was a very nice house, and in front of it was an immaculate front lawn, yard for our US friends. It could be described as a bowling green, perfectly mown with those stripes you see and surrounded by a border of cottage garden plants. Into this idyllic setting came the driving school car, a 1.5 tons of V6 powered metal traveling at 60 miles per hour. The senior instructor braked hard, pulled the wheel round, floored the accelerator, and aimed back at the road, carving a pair of deep ruts in the lawn as it went. As the car got back on the road, the trainee instructor yelled, "Stop!" And sure enough, an emergency stop followed with skid marks and clouds of smoke. At this point, the senior instructor turned to the student instructor and said, "Okay, how could you have worded your instructions differently?" Well, I hope the trainee instructor really left an impression, and I hope the students don't get stuck in a rut. But I guess we'll just have to wait for the next episode of Law and Order. In the landscape justice system, lawn-based offenses are considered especially heinous. In Lincolnshire, the detectives who investigate these vicious felonies are members of an elite squad known as the Special Garden Unit. These are their stories. Check out all 4 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.